Item 1 is the GPLET analysis for Hotel del Sol, scheduled for 15 minutes. Staff has an update on the economic analysis for the Hotel del Sol redevelopment project. Mr. Manager.
Mr. Mayor, this is a follow-up to a conversation and direction you previously provided. We provided you with information in your packet. Mike Czakowski and I are here and available to answer any questions, up to and including a short presentation if you'd like. Otherwise, we'd just be happy to answer questions.
If, Mr. Manager, if there could be a small presentation, just overview in detail, not too much detail, but detail, and then we'll take it from there.
All right, go ahead, Mike.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council Romero, members of the council, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager, apologies. So this is the former Motel 6 located on 960 South Freeway, just south of Star Pass Boulevard on the frontage road. As I mentioned, it was a Motel 6, not in the best of conditions, and in fact, running occupancy rates at about 29% before. One other thing to bring up on this, want to thank Mr. Kerr, who I don't see here, brought up the question about the police activity on site. Over the last 3 years, we've had about 308 calls for service at this site. So we anticipate with all the work and going into this, we're going to really decrease that. SVP Holdings has acquired that and changed it. It is now known as Hotel del Sol. They are creating what's known, or what they refer to as, a lifestyle boutique hotel, which is a Tucson-centric local experience to business and leisure visitors. They want to have it separated from other hotels where you just go in and it's any other kind of chain you stay in. Focus Hospitality is now managing the site, and they've already done some improvements to the area, including a cleanup of the entire interior and exterior of the site, landscaping included. There are 111 rooms. 98 rooms will be what the finished product has. Renovation cost is about $3.1 million. They anticipate to begin in March, the completion of September of 19. They'll be updating all the rooms, adding meeting space and food and beverage amenities, which are currently not on site. As I mentioned, the current occupancy rate is 29%. After stabilization in about 5 or 6 years, they're projecting it to be at 71%, which does exceed the county average of 65%. So looking at some good numbers here. Current daily rate, when it was the Motel 6, $49 per night. They project that to be at $105, so at least doubling that, and possibly higher. Current appraised value is $2.4 million. Post value, it's projected at $5.7 million, which does meet the GPLET requirement to add 100% value to the property. They are requesting an 8-year GPLET. The city GPLET rent would be included in that. The total value of that GPLET over the 8 years would be $719,000, which would be a GPLET rent back to the city of $8,999 per year. Direct revenues on that include $3.4 million from construction sales tax, hotel taxes, food and beverage taxes, and this also includes $2.2 million directly to the city of Tucson. Again, these are all direct revenues. This would be an increase of $264,000 above and beyond what is currently generating per year for the city of Tucson. And once the GPLET term expires, this would be a projected $305,000 in additional property tax, sales, and bed taxes for the city.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to thank the new owner, Vishal Patel. The property manager is Focus Hospitality, and the person in charge here in Hotel del Sol is Sue-Ann Lim. A wonderful team that basically is putting a hotel that was a problem, nuisance to the neighbors, to good work. The hotel name will change in the future when the construction happens and the investment happens. And I just want to say this is a wonderful project. They're working directly with Kroger Lane neighbors and Menlo Park neighbors, and it's already. We already see the difference in terms of the calls to TPD, and the investment that's happening in the property already. So I just want to congratulate the new owner, Vishal Patel, the team of Focus Hospitality, and am looking forward to the investment in this. When the GPLET was being put together, one of my insistences was to make sure that we included the hotels along the freeway from Congress to Silver Lake, because I see that area as, and I was just telling the mayor, I see that area as our permanent gem show row. It is something that we need to make sure that we're investing in as a city and giving the opportunity for the owners to invest in these hotels, because the gem show is a very valuable asset, an economic driver for the city of Tucson, and this is the second hotel on this side, on the west side of the freeway, that makes major investments. The first one was Hotel McCoy, which is boasting a lot of success, and now Hotel del Sol, which the name is going to change, and there's going to be, what did you say, close to $5 million invested in it?
Correct.
And so I'm really happy, I'm looking forward to it, and I'd like to make sure that we move this item.
Okay, we've got a motion. Got a motion and a second. Any other conversation on this item? If not, all in favor of directing the city attorney to draft the GPLET lease agreement, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, great. Thank you. All right, let's move on to item 2, which is a GPLET analysis for the Trinity office project, scheduled for 30 minutes. Staff has an update on the economic analysis for the Trinity office project. Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, again, we have provided you a report. We are recommending you consider the GPLET as outlined in our recommendation. Mike and I are available if you'd like a presentation on it.
Yeah, I
Otherwise,
don't need a presentation. I'm surprised we got 30 minutes on this. This is pretty straightforward.
We can cut it to 3.
I'm going to try. It's $4.2 million in indirect benefits for $750,000 in foregone revenues. It's a $7.5 million project cost. It's a medical tenant, and I think that's really an important piece of this conversation. It's going to bring medical combination of El Rio and TMC down near 4th Avenue and the university. Provide 113 new jobs with an average salary of over $65,000 a year. So forget the multiplier effects. All the project amenities to the area really warrant approving the GPLET, and that's my motion.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to ask the city attorney to draft the GPLET lease agreement for the Trinity project. If there's any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, thank you, Mike. Good job. All right, let's move on to item 3, which is the budget update, scheduled for 45 minutes. Time has been set aside for discussion of the fiscal year 2017-2018 preliminary financial results and the fiscal year 2018-2019 first quarter general fund projection. Mr. Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it's an opportunity for us to provide you with the report on the closure of the 18 year and also the first quarter of 19. At the end of the discussion, I will be looking for some recommendation, or excuse me, some direction on my recommendations. I'd be appreciative of getting that. We will, I think we're on a great track through your leadership. We've done a lot of things over the last several years that I think are starting to come to fruition now. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joyce Garland, our CFO, to go over just a high-level overview, and then we'll get into whatever questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to start talking off about the general fund, where we ended the fiscal year 18, and then we'll look at first quarter projections. We do have information on the Gulf Enterprise Fund, and we'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll conclude with some of the recommendations the city manager is bringing to Mayor Council. I've been doing this a long time for the city of Tucson, and I just want to say for the first time how positive this really looks. From the materials, you'll notice that our revenues increased over 3% in the general fund, That's phenomenal. And I know that you've been with us through this whole history from the recession, and we are really seeing an upswing in our sales tax. As I had shown in the attachment to the memorandum, there was actually different categories of sales tax. So we saw that our retail is way up. Our restaurants are way up, and our construction sales tax. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the construction sales tax because that sales tax, that could be considered one time, even though we continually have construction, with the major projects that are going on in the city right now, that's actually driving that up.
Just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. By the way, I've already read this slide about 15 times, and I emailed it to my dad because I thought it was so cool. But I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Are you saying that our revenues went up 3% and our expenditures went down 2.7% for a total of 5.7% to the good in the general fund in the city?
That's correct.
I really want to commend the manager, the mayor, and the rest of the council for this. Look, you know, I'm making light of this, but this is actually a really big deal. We're doing this on a weird Wednesday and all that stuff, but I'm really proud of the whole team. This is one of the reasons why the parks bond passed. This is one of the reasons why we actually have communication in the city departments right now. And the difference between now and 2010, when I first took this job, is unbelievable. And Mr. Manager, I just let your team know how great they're doing. Every single time a different new deputy or director comes into the office to talk about whatever, we just get great response. Every single time a employee and a constituent comes to the office, we get response and we get work done. And congratulations. Here's to many more reports like this.
I think that
I guess
says
you're
it
done.
all. That says it all. Can't say much more than that. What we did want to show you, really, if you look at the graph on the year ending, you'll see that we had $29 million to the good. And we had set aside cash carry forward from 17 to 18, of which we were going to use. And I just really wanted to show that the way our revenues came in and the savings we had in expenditures, we actually didn't have to use our cash carry forward. And that's, I think, just an important thing here. So now we can carry more dollars forward over time.
How much was the, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, how much was the budgeted cash carry forward?
The budgeted cash carry forward, we assigned $43 million.
Okay.
And then we spent about $24.5.
So are we earning interest on that 15?
Yes, we are. It's not a huge interest rate, by the way. It's at least 1%. Let's admit. So then, two, I wanted to talk about our fund balance, because this is where you get flexibility. I wanted to show the history. So if you look at the assigned and the unassigned, so assigned is where we set dollars aside for a specific purpose, and then the other unassigned is just dollars that are waiting there for use. If you look at 2015, if you add the $4 million and the $15 million, those two numbers together, that's about $20 million. We are now at $65.3 million in just a few years, and that's phenomenal. That just shows you how well that you, with your leadership, have helped us manage through the monies that we've come in and doing the services for the community. All right, so where are we now for fiscal year 19? Well, we're doing just as well. We're watching the revenues very closely, the sales taxes. We do have the continuation of construction. I mean, we just talked about 2 projects that are going to be coming up, and there are more, I know, in the hopper. Sales taxes are increasing at least 3.8%. We are trending with the state right now, which is really good. So it shows us we're all in line here. Now, I did get a report from Dr. George Hammonds of the Eller College, because this is huge growth. So it's interesting. He's actually going to be having a talk in December if you go to it. So now that he has all of our historical information on our taxes, his update is going to say Tucson is back on track. Will it hold? So that's what we're going to watch, right? We are on track. We are going to have regular revenue growth right now. Now, what'll happen is it's going to increase. We're going to have a good increase in this coming year, and then it'll probably level off somewhere between 2 and 3% growth. We do continue to hold our expenses. So we do have savings from our personnel. We're expecting about $1 million so far in vacancy savings. I'm expecting that to go up because we are having turnover in certain areas. It takes a little bit of time now to do some hiring, so we do have savings in that area. We also have some department efficiencies we're still relying on. One is the jail board, that change in how that model works. Some transit efficiencies, and then other department efficiencies. We've actually reduced 4 more FTEs within the general fund. So we continually look at the way that we do business. And then I just wanted to show and talk again about the carry forward that we're using in 18 that we actually put into the adopted budget. And again, if on our way we're going to spend it, we'll be able to cover that with our ongoing revenues. So again, that's good news. We will spend most of it. The fire recruit class is going on. We are going to be talking about the employee one-time distribution. The permitting system, they are on track to continue with that project this year. The ERP upgrade is actually complete and it's online. That was a big undertaking. IT hardware, another software system that is almost completed. We had the central plant expansion going on with the diocese. And then we're not going to use the fuel contingency as we thought we would this year. And there are a couple vehicles for planning development services and general services that will be purchased this year.
Joyce, is this GF? Is that all GF?
That's all GF.
Just want to.
Well, now we'll talk about golf.
Can I ask you a question? about
Certainly.
this? With all the good news about this cost savings and the trend upwards, there are the ongoing issues about attrition, personnel attrition, and vacancies, and compression issues. I know that I've read that you are talking with the local or the departments that are experiencing some of these issues. When will we know how much of what is in the hopper could be used for addressing the issue of attrition, vacancies, and compression?
Councilmember Scott, that's a good question. Actually, with the recommendations, we're going to talk about some of the decompression that we'd like to achieve. We do plan to come back in 45 days to Mayor and Council with some other recommendations.
There's a slide on this, right?
It's at the end.
And the recommendations that you have, I know we're not talking about them yet, but they're that, right? Recommendations, Mayor and Council we still have the capacity to give input and change those recommendations.
And as we do in November, we talk about Tucson Golf and their year-end results. We show this historical slide just to really illustrate how well OB Sports has been doing managing these golf courses. We do still have a loan with the general fund of about $1.4 million, but it is continually decreasing. It's just going to take time. But saying that, we are not putting dollars aside for any kind of improvements, any capital. We're just really maintaining the operations.
And Joyce, you didn't think you're just going to go to the next slide.
I was hoping.
The depreciation and interest expense is not noted in the fiscal year 29 adopted space.
Certainly,
Is there a reason for
Councilmember.
that?
Yes, we actually don't budget for depreciation.
Okay.
That's a non-cash item, so that's just an accounting transaction, and we don't budget for it.
Okay, but depreciation we've had
It
this
affects their financial statements. It's really telling you that their assets the wear and tear is great, and there's no replenishment of that.
Well, and I think that you gave us a memo, the city manager gave us a memo, and it has a space for golf, right? And To be honest with you, I'm really happy that we're in a much healthier financial place with golf. I'm really, really happy because it wasn't, right? A few years back, unfortunately, the Parks Director at the time did not give us the full picture as to what was happening with golf. It was in a huge hole, an $8 million hole, to be more specific. And because of this mayor and council, we've hammered it in that we want to make sure that golf is paying for itself. And because of all that, the work that this mayor and council have done, we're in a much healthier place. The reality of the capital needs, though, is something that we still need to continue talking about as to how we're going to solve those issues. One of the ideas that I suggested and the city manager followed was to put $5 million for golf improvements in our parks bond so that we could try and figure out how best to use that money so that we can become, golf can become an organization or a department that pays for itself and then some, right? And that the capital improvements that we have are not a liability. And so I am really happy that we're at a much healthier financial place with golf. But the big question mark with golf still remains are what are the capital needs? Because that's in the millions. And you don't have that in here, and you don't have that in your memo to mayor and council. So could you repeat how much is the need in terms of capital needs in golf? I know that we have a list of
We do have a
all
list,
the-
and
all the
I'm
needs.
sorry, Councilmember, I think it's,
or approximately.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Romero, as I recall, it's above 20 million. I mean, it's between 20 and 21 million.
Okay, 21.
That's what I recall. I'm doing that off the top of my head, so
And
we'll confirm that.
I
and get
just
it the
wanted to make
council.
sure that we talked about this because this is amazing, great news. I mean, the information you're giving us is really wonderful, something that we've all looked to get. We've all worked so hard to make sure city manager, budget, all of the department directors are to thank for this amazing report. But yet, I just want to make sure that we're still thinking in the future, we still have some issues to resolve, and the capital needs in golf is one of them. We're in a healthy place, we're good, I'm happy, but let's not forget that there are certain needs and a certain big chunk of money that we have to still make decisions on.
you are so right.
So I'm going to add to that because Rena's right. This is operations, and that's great. The numbers, again, off the top of my head as well, are about $20 million over the next 3 or 4 years. That was the projection. Prop 407 simply took care of some irrigation needs in a couple of the courses. It did not touch the rest of the capital needs. So we are having the ongoing conversations. We talked about Silverbell. We've talked about maybe offloading some of the obligations that we have in terms of just turf reduction. But yeah, those needs are not going away anytime soon, and so we have to continue to have a serious conversation about how we deal with the enterprise and whether or not it even stays an enterprise.
Your Honor.
Councilman Cunningham.
There's about 5 different options we've talked about. I mean, it's nothing new. We've got several different strategies. They're all floating out there. We've looked at possible fairway development options in different courses. We've looked at possible partnerships with big community partners such as the University of Arizona or something like that. We've looked at extending the effluent infrastructure pipe that is enjoyed currently by the Silverbell course, that if it was enjoyed by the El Rio course, we'd have a drastic improvement in the profit loss margin for that specific course. So we've got several, and we've got this $5 million to address some of the irrigation issues. I think the other piece is one of the things that our depreciation isn't reflecting is that we're now, from what I understand, leasing golf carts. So we don't have a golf cart fleet that's maintaining and depreciating because they're all under lease. So we've done a lot of the things that we need to do. The unfortunate thing for Tucson, quite frankly, is that it isn't, it's a national trend. And that is very unfortunately in some parts of the country, just because of the world we live in with technology, the number of hours in a day, the amount of time it takes to play golf, golf is down around the country. Rounds everywhere are down around the country. So I'm pretty actually optimistic. I think all sports go up and down in these lulls. I think that once there's a good American champion, again, people start going back to the golf. Because I mean, that's how this stuff kind of works. So I think that we'll see some of this stuff is outside of what we can do. But I think that we've got so many different options to address these that I'm pretty optimistic as long as we keep coming back at this apple once a year and knocking each one off the list. All right, let's try the development piece. Okay, let's try the partnership piece. Okay, let's try the irrigation extension piece. And we keep knocking them off once a year. We're going to find we have one of the most healthy municipal golf programs in the country.
Okay, Joyce, anything else?
We just had a slide about the loan going down for the golf courses. So we'd like to talk about the recommendations. The first is we are doing well with our revenues and holding down our costs. And we do believe that we can do the 2% wage increase for employees who've been with the city over 2 years, which would be effective. And I did have a typo in here. It is December 23rd and not the 21st. So the 23rd is the last pay period. It starts the January pay period. And then to proceed with a decompression plan for the fire commissioned, and that we would bring back to mayor and council within 45 days. We don't have that information yet, but we are working with the department. We would recommend increasing the one-time distribution from $1,000 to $1,500. That would have the same criteria as we did last fiscal year, and that would actually be November. We'd like to make that payment soon, right before the holiday. Assign $2 million in the construction sales tax and the permitting fees. Many of the development agreements that we have, we've actually obligated some of those dollars back as our reimbursement. So we'd like to set aside $2 million in order to pay that back. Set aside $4.6 million for the self-insurance. So it's not around $5 million, but it is $4.6 million because by the end of the year, we already have $500,000 put away. Assign $1.5 million for parks and recreation, and that could be for maintenance and other operational needs. Assign $2 million for the energy performance contract. When we talked with mayor and council during the budget process, we talked about actually financing that. We have the available cash and capacity, so instead of doing a financing, we're asking to actually use cash to pay for those improvements. And then increase our vehicle maintenance fund by $1 million and our building maintenance fund by $1 million.
Mr. Mayor.
Your Honor.
I'm going to go to the manager first.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to point out a couple of things that I think are important as you think about the recommendations. If you go back to December of 15, when we first talked about the approach to the budget, I'd suggested to you the discussion really needed to be on at least focusing on operations and making sure that we were able to balance operations, and then we start working on capital. And if you recall, we set a plan that by the end of 17 we'd be okay operationally, and we start looking at capital. At that time, I'd also suggested that we would look at other sources, i.e. the bonds. We went to through Prop 101, Prop 407. As opportunities. What you're starting to see is, although the operations are in good shape, we do have, as Councilmember Romero and Kozaczek both mentioned, we still have issues on capital, and it's not just in golf, it's across the board. So this is the start of building those opportunities for you or us to address. Ultimately, I would just suggest to you that this is the flexibility that we've been striving for, is to give you the flexibility to make a call versus having your back up against the wall. And the last thing I'll leave you with, and I've said this to the staff, we're not rolling in dough. This is, when you look at the numbers, they're small percentages. I mean, the numbers seem big, but they're really small for an organization of our size. I think we need to stay on track. But it does give you some of that flexibility. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Manager, just a couple questions. I'll turn over to council. The 2% wage adjustment, what is that on an annual basis for all employees? What's the number?
Mr. Mayor, it's $6 million.
Okay, and what about the one-time distribution, going from 1,000 to 1,500? What's that?
3 million.
3? Okay. Okay.
3.2.
3.3. And then I know we don't have any hard numbers yet on the decompression, but what's kind of the range you're looking at there?
Mr. Mayor, let me just, we're looking at our notes here as you're asking these questions. Going back to the one-time distribution, we had budgeted to 7. We're expecting the increase to be about 1.3, so it'll be closer to 4 with the for the $1,500.
Okay.
So that's that. With regard to the decompression, I'm really looking at about $2 million at this point. I think that if we can do it over a step period or stepped number of years, I think we can get to it. Because keep in mind, although we specifically mentioned fire here, we have decompression issues or compression issues and weight stagnation elsewhere. And so I have to think about it in a broader context. Last year, through your leadership, we talked about some of the police issues and recruitment and retention. We were able to address some of those, but we have others. And I think fire, as I had mentioned to you in my discussions with you, is next. We need to deal with that. I will tell you, I don't expect it to be 100% decompressed, but we're going to make some tremendous progress towards expanding those pay ranges, particularly those folks that have been tenured and would have otherwise seen step increases.
Okay, so again, kind of very macro, but if we've got the $29 million surplus, I'll call it, if that's the right
We
word.
call it excess revenue, sir.
It's a new word
There's
to
never
us, so, you
surplus.
know.
There's never a surplus.
And it looks like your recommendation deals with about 24 million of it. So that means the other 5 will go back into reserves.
Mr. Mayor, that's correct. And so keep in mind, it's important that 29 million is one time. And so when we're talking about adjustments or ongoing expenses, I can't count on that. I can do it maybe for 1 or 2 years, but I can't count on that going forward. But my thought at this point is to put that into our reserve, and again, builds flexibility, keeping in mind that we're mid-year. And so the conversation will evolve between now and the start of next fiscal year, which gives you, again, more flexibility.
Okay. All right. Councilman Romero, then we'll go down the line.
Yeah. I had a particular question about the vehicle maintenance fund. Are these vehicle maintenance in other departments besides public safety? Because a Prop 101 should be used to replace fire and police. So
That's
were you
correct.
thinking
That's
with this
correct.
vehicle?
That's correct.
It is.
You're exactly correct. This is not public safety
It's not.
vehicles. These are general fund vehicles, plan development services, parks and recreation, et cetera, that have needs and quite frankly have not been addressed for many years.
And then the building maintenance fund of $1 million, what are you thinking? HVACs, roofs, replacement, what is it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes to all of that. I will tell you that we do have issues with City Hall. We haven't identified that as the main recipient, but we have issues with our elevator. We have issues with our fire alarms.
Fire alarm system.
Fire alarm system. So we do have some serious investments that we're going to have to make in City Hall. At this point, what I'm really looking for is direction from the council. We'll develop those plans, but it will be all of the above because I think our needs are varied. And again, not just City Hall, but across the board.
And then for your fire, the mayor asked about it, but what is your approximate allocation for fire decompression?
So I'm looking at somewhere between 2 and 2.5 million annually. I'm going to have to look at that on a bigger scale to see what that can buy us. That's what I've sort of earmarked. And once I have that in my hip pocket, then I can come back and say to you exactly what that looks like. I'm trying to plan for the 20 year. And so by us, kind of identifying that becomes the target for us internally. But if, for example, if I can do most of it and expend a little more, then I'll do it. But that's where I'm headed at this point.
Well, personally, I'd like to thank you and your staff, and of course, the work of this mayor and council, because you are looking at the human capital very, very directly and targeting the human capital of this organization. There are people that have stood with us and by us through furloughs, through years and years of not seeing cost of living adjustments, not seeing any raises. So I think it's really important that we, in turn, look at the success of this report and then plan for making sure that all of our employees are compensated because of the years and years that they stood by us through thick and thin, and many years of thin. So unfortunately, the one thing that I have been talking to Councilmember Cunningham about a bit, and I've talked to the city manager about, is taking a special look and a very specific look at those that are making the least amongst us. Excluding mayor and council, but those that are making the minimum wage, right? The minimum wage looks different now than it did back when we first started the recession in 2008. In 2008, a $12 an hour job was okay. Now the minimum wage will soon turn to $12. And so those people that have held on with us for 8 years or more, that are making $12, $13, $14 an hour, are bumping up against the new state minimum wage. And so at that time, 12 bucks an hour was okay job with benefits. Now it's the minimum wage. And so what I'd like to see happen, and hopefully my colleagues agree, is that we take a look at bringing up the living wage of those that are making least amongst us. So if the minimum wage is rubbing up to 12 bucks an hour, then we should strive to bring up that wage for our minimum wage workers, because they're going to become minimum wage workers. And so I would personally like to bring them up to $30,000 a year, which, if you think about it, it's about $14.50 an hour, making $30,000 a year. And if we can all start thinking about a head of household making $30,000 a year, is, even if we bring our wage up to $14.50, or I think it's $14.67 or something like that, I would like to see it come up to 15 bucks an hour, to be honest with you, because that's the standard that Amazon is actually bringing to Tucson. Amazon is paying their minimum wage workers 15 bucks an hour. And so pretty soon the city of Tucson is going to be competing with Amazon for workers. And that's at 15 bucks an hour. A $15 an hour employee makes a little bit more than $30,000 a year. A head of household making $30,000 a year really doesn't pay much. It really doesn't. It really does not. And so what I'd like to see happen, and I'm going to write a request for this, is that we look at bringing those that are making least amongst them and then decompressing from the bottom up. And of course, I agree with fire being decompressed. I think that's a good investment. We have to make sure that we're making that investment. But plus, so it's that and. Because when we brought up we gave a 2.5 increase in pay, those that were making the most, some people got a $5,000 raise with a 2.5% increase. Those that were making the least brought them $500. So a 2.5% increase is not equitable throughout the board. And so when we start looking at just a certain percentage across the board, it keeps adding to the wage gap. And that concerns me a lot. And so I hope to bring more information on this. Request that you take a look at it. Some of my staff have been looking at it with human resources and finance, taking a look at what it would cost to bring the minimum wage up and then decompressing from the bottom up, as well as taking a look at decompression of fire, taking a look at making sure that everyone throughout the organization is sharing on the success of our finances. But you see what I'm saying? It's a 2.5 increase is different to a person making $100,000 a year to those that are making $28,000 a year. The wage gap keeps increasing. So I just wanted to make sure that you started thinking about that so that we could think of a creative and progressive way of bringing wages up to our employees.
Mr. Mayor, we're going to be coming back within 45 days and talking about the fire decompression plan. If the council would like, I can certainly look at that for that lower end of the pay scale. At that time, within that time frame, I'd be happy to look at it, and we can run the numbers, give you scenarios, and give you ideas. So that'll save you a memo, and save
Okay.
me an email.
Okay.
But if that works, we can do that.
Yeah, sure. Councilmember Cunningham.
So a couple things on the recommendations. I really don't want to make a motion to lock these in. I want to have a little flexibility. Maybe there's 200,000 and we can move one way to another. I mean, do we need the full million, or will 800 do it? I mean, I want you to have some flexibility there. I mean, I'm sure that you're where you need to be too, but I'm not comfortable locking these in today.
Right.
That's the first piece I'd probably point out. Second thing I point out is that the decompression for fire, probably, we want to model that a little bit with what we did for police. They did get the 2.5%, and they had a decompression piece to it. So I'd really like to see, as much as possible, factor in that 2% with the decompression so that they're all getting something. Maybe they get everybody gets 1% plus or something. The other piece I'd recommend is, I remember we had a sliding scale where, depending on how many steps you'd skipped, and I know we're not using steps anymore, but I'm trying to make the analogy with how we did police. With what I remember was, depending on how much you'd stayed loyal. I mean, how many years you'd basically missed what you had expected when you first signed it on the dotted line. Not that was in your contract, what was the going accepted. Depending on that, that's how much you got when we decompressed. And I think we topped it out at a certain point, because giving one person a 30% raise in 1 year was a little bit, just a little bit much. But I'd like to consider what we did for police in that model. If that costs us a few $100,000 more, I think it's worth it. I think if we do that right away, it makes a big impact on the morale and the morale and the performance of the firefighters we have. They've stuck with us, and so I want to make sure that we're making this a priority. As to everybody making $30,000 goal, I have that goal too, but I'm a little bit more flexible on it. If you include the one-time disbursement, and you use a 2160 because we pay double for all our holidays, and you factor in the fact that our pension system and health benefit system is considerably more than what Amazon's paying. I mean, they did cut employee benefits to get to $15 an hour. Right now, if you're making about $13.43 and you factor in the one-time distribution, you're almost to about $30,000. So, meet halfway, around $13.94 or whatever like that. And from what I understand, for our people who have enough years in, who have more than 2 years in, if they get 2%, most of them will get to that $13.94. It'll be pretty darn close. I don't think there's a big delta. I just don't know what it is. We'd really like to get those numbers before we go farther than that, but I think it's very doable. But those are my two big things with this cycle. And I'm really happy with how we're doing. I'm really happy we're able to kind of spread this money out so that we're taking care of contingencies long term. But quite frankly, with what we did for police and all things in the world, the fire people have waited long enough. And so let's try to get what we can do for them done, and at least get some semblance of decompression there, especially for the ones who are, 20, 30% out. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. I think that other than that, congratulations again on being such a well-managed city and all those other things. And I know what we're putting out there for you is challenging, but I also think it's something that can be done because over this past 2 years, we've seen somewhat of a miracle in the city. So now I'm asking you guys to work another one.
Councilmember Durham, then Scott.
We've discussed this before, Mr. Ortega, but obviously any analysis of minimum wage or compensation needs to include the total value of the compensation package and vacation, benefit, health insurance, et cetera, et cetera. So, we've talked about that already, and you intend to do it, and that's great.
Councilmember Scott.
Thank you. I'm still concerned about the vacancies. Are you pretty sure that throughout this different departments that there are vacancies that need to be vacant and others where vacancies should be reinstated? Because I think there are some folks who would appreciate having additional help. If you had $3.1 million in savings because of vacancies, does that still harm, or how can we deal with those vacancies where some would appreciate a little more assistance?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Scott, so the conversation is really one of, kind of going back in time on when we first started this discussion, where every vacancy is an opportunity. And I am continuing to challenge the departments. I will continue to do that. I think that there are areas that we can see the need for filling vacancies. We've done that, but it is not an automatic. And I think what's happened, and sometimes folks that will talk to you don't understand, is that I'm challenging the directors to come back on every vacancy and make sure that they're rethinking how we do business. So I was recently asked on town hall, am I finished dismantling the organization? And the answer is no, because I believe that the flexibility and really looking in that long term is necessary in order for us to continue down a sustainable path. And I feel very strongly about that. We recognize that it's difficult. Change is difficult. We also recognize that folks are stressed, et cetera. But I'm also challenging the department directors to find different ways to do things. Now, at some point, you have no other choice but to add resource, and we're certainly doing that. But the days of there's a vacancy, so we're going to fill it, are gone. There's a vacancy, we analyze it, we study it, make sure we need it in that way. And sometimes those vacancies are brought back in a different configuration, different type of position to help us meet the needs that are out there and serve the public.
That's exactly what I think I needed to hear, was that there were vacancies that were absolutely deleted, but that if there is still a need, it can be filled with a new title and new assistance in these places where they're really hurting and need that. So, and again, I'd like to echo what some of my colleagues have already said. I really appreciate knowing the specifics of the upward trend in our budget and the work that you did to bring this to us for us to clearly understand how much it has improved. I have to do a shout out to Visit Tucson for its contribution. Visit Tucson may not be as visible perhaps to the local people, but they have certainly made a big splash in the marketing out there. People are coming here and helping to exercise and enjoy the gastronomic experiences here besides the great outdoors. So I have to tell you that I'm very appreciative of what they've done, because with all the things that are going on, new buildings going up, new travelers coming through, and the people of Tucson who are buying locally and in the city of Tucson, we got to shout out to them and say thank you. And we do hope that you continue to do that, and that we certainly appreciate all those folks who are contributing to the greater good of the economy, which is on an upward trend in Tucson. I'm very happy to hear about it, and thank you for you and your staff for what you've done so far to help us through this that has been a dark period into the light again. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Councilman Kosatsik?
Sure. I appreciate the sentiment for the increase in wages. Durham's right. We need to consider the entire, entire ERE package. I'd also like to see included in that an analysis of who we're really talking about. Are they temps? Are they lifeguards? Or, what are they? These aren't all people in career track positions that, that we're discussing. In addition to that, as you increase the low end of the wage, you're actually increasing, or you're exacerbating the compression problem. So to decompress from the bottom up is almost an oxymoron. We need to have greater conversation about that. How much is in our building maintenance fund right now? I appreciate the addition of $1 million. It's pretty depleted, isn't it?
2.1.
So we're at 2.1, all right. So that's significantly better than 2 or 3 years ago when you started out. It was $250,000 or something. So.
Yes, it was 250,000. I'm sorry, I didn't. Yeah, it was 250,000.
So that's amazing. That's great progress. The line item you've got in here for the $2 million for the obligations under development agreements, that's not really an option. That's included in the list, but it's something we're obligated to do by contract anyway.
That's correct.
And your $1 million, you've got 1.5 for Parks and Rec maintenance and operations. I think it's important for the public to recognize that that's keeping our 407 promise. Absolutely. That we're putting together a maintenance fund to maintain the new amenities that they just approved fairly substantially. 500,000 of that, though, as I understand it, is for park rangers.
That's correct. And
you're proposing that come out of the general fund or out of TPD's budget?
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Kosatsik, both of them are general fund. But at this point, what I've suggested is we're going to allocate $1.5 million to Parks and Rec. We're going to work towards filling those CSO, and they'll basically be CSO type positions. They've got plenty of vacancy savings there, and so at the end, it's all one pot. Where I'm headed with that Parks and Rec piece is that ultimately I want to be able to carry on at least $1 million. That's pure M&O without the park rangers. So as time goes on, I've got incrementally or smaller incremental additions to that. But at this point, I'm really looking to fill in those CSOs, and I've got this as the backup for it.
Okay. Anything else? Councilmember Scott.
I'd like to move the city manager's recommendations.
Okay. Let's see if we get a second for that.
If we may, can we take our time? I mean, we still have time to be able to make the.
You want to go them individually?
What is it that you want to move immediately?
So, Mr. Mayor, what I'd like to do is, or ask you to, is give me direction on the 2% increase for employees based on the criteria I've outlined. The decompression, which will come back to the council in 45 days, and the one-time distribution from 1,000 to 1,500. The rest of them, they can be part of a future discussion, but quite frankly, those are, we can start moving on some of those, like the building and the maintenance. I mean, it's building and the vehicle. We can start moving on those fairly quickly.
So you'd like to see a motion on the first 3 bullet points as outlined in the
in my memo, that's
PowerPoint.
correct. So it's basically, I'll just read them quickly. It's the 2% wage adjustment for employees, including the three sub-bullets, and the bullet point on the $1,000 distribution up to $1,500.
And then on the remainder of it, you're just looking for direction.
I'd like direction on that. That's our recommendation if you've got ideas on.
I
would like to amend my motion then to just be the first 3.
Why don't we take that first, because I think we can.
Let me just help you with a little bit on the item that's the decompression plan for fire. What I'll do is I'll add the 30,000 discussion as well. So in other words, I'll bring that back to you in 45 days, so you can at least look it over.
Okay.
Just so that you know it's included as a part of that direction. I'll bring it back.
All right. So let's take those first 3 bullet points first. I think that's the motion. Can we get a second on that?
So the 2% wage adjustment, the one-time distribution, and the decompression for fire.
And basically what's listed there in those bullet points.
And for the minimum wage workers.
And for the minimum
That's
wage.
correct.
Okay, then I'll second that motion if it was, Shirley,
It was.
if that was changed to reflect, okay.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second on those first 3 bullet points. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I'm not voting for this. This is my discussion. I'm not voting for this. I'm not taking fire out of the 2%. I just made my comments that I want the flexibility for them to be able to be included in the 2% and get decompression or that possibility. By making this motion, I feel that we're totally locking them out of the 2%. So I'm not voting for that.
Mr.
Now, that's
Mayor,
number one. Number
Mr. Mayor,
two.
let me
I don't
just
think
help
that's
you.
right, yeah.
That was not my intent. So keep in mind, I'll be bringing back to you, so the 2% includes everyone at this point. And then what I'll do is I'll bring back the fire decompression. What I will do is I will look at what that 2% does to the decompression conversation. But you're not voting to not give fire something that everyone else gets. Well, that's not the intent.
So we're basically giving you the opportunity to come back and say, this is how much it's going to cost to include a decompression
Correct.
into the whole plan.
But
correct.
additionally, all employees are getting the 2%.
Within the criteria, which I believe is 2 years, they're permanent
Yeah.
employees, at least 2 years of service as of December 23, 2018.
And all employees, in addition to that, are getting the $1,500 one-time.
Again, within the criteria that's listed there, that's correct.
And then,
Right.
No, but Paul's right. It says, "and are not a part of the decompression plan." You finish reading the sentence.
Where you at? Did I miss that?
So the motion would be to include the 2% to fire,
Missed that.
followed by the ensuing discussions about the decompression issues and 45 days. That's what the motion I understood
Yeah.
it to be.
yeah,
I got it, so it's a change.
so
That's
you
fine.
can delete at least on the
I'm glad you caught
slide,
that. I didn't see
and who are not part of the decompression plan. Paul's, that probably should solve it for
I
you.
still have another one.
All right, let's try your second one.
So the second one is, and I just want, this is actually probably solvable.
They're all solvable.
I want to be sure we're rolling the money that we're using on this one-time distribution increase, and I'm all about the one-time. I think it's a good thing. We're doing an increase. Are we using one-time money? And why don't we use the one-time money and then why would, for the $500, why don't we use one-time money for the $500 so we may go back to 1,000? That way we can take that 500 that we're saving if it's ongoing and roll it into decompression.
Councilmember Cunningham, the extra $500 for employee for the one time is coming from one-time monies. The 2% is coming from ongoing revenues.
So that $5 million of one-time money, that's where we're using. That's going to be for the disbursement.
Not all of it.
No, it's not quite $5 million for the one time.
It's 4.
It's like 4.
It's $4 million for the one-time disbursement. And I just heard you say we have $5 million in our fund balance of one-time money, correct?
We have more than that in our fund balance.
Right, we have more than that in our fund.
But that's one-time money only.
That's only one-time money, so once it's gone, it's gone. When we do wage increases, that comes from ongoing revenue.
And how much of
Because
our,
that's an
so how much,
ongoing
what
increase.
percentage of our one-time money are we spending on this disbursement?
4 million.
4 million, which is how much of our what percentage of our one-time money is that?
No, it's out of 29. So it's
I mean, we're going to blow 25% on a
25%.
25%, which is fine. I mean, look, I'm good with the 1,000, but now we're basically 1.5ing it, and it's eating a little bit of our disbursement. I'd rather be using that money for some of the other expenses. Look, here's the thing, and I'm not trying to be nitpicky here, but the bottom line is that, okay, we're going to spend $4 million on one-time money. Well, we can take one of that and put it into to accelerate our health savings account self-insurance fund, and then we have it as long-term money. So that's kind of what I'm thinking out loud here. That's why that's why I said at the beginning of my comments, I'm sure that the management team knows what they're doing, but I don't want to be locked into this stuff today. That's all I was saying.
So, comment on that too. I don't fundamentally disagree with Paul at all. We have a package that we're looking at in front of us that has each line item has a number on it. But I kind of sense that you guys are retrenching a little bit on the first one because you had originally intended to not include fire in that 2%, or that sentence would have read differently. So I'd like to have some time to really see how this whole package flows together. Unless you just simply have a drop-dead decision-making date that you have to have for any of these, but I don't think we have that.
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Kozaczek, if you remember when I first started the discussion and looked at bringing back the fire conversation, the 2% is part of that. But I don't know how that's going to affect their decompression. And so my whole thought was
What
I'd
do
bring
you mean
back,
you don't?
well, I mean, if I bring back a package that includes the 2%, which was what I was looking at, I was looking at bringing it back as a package for the entire of that department. If we start where they all get the 2%, fine. We bring back a package, it'll be slightly
Well,
different
that's
than what I
going
was thinking
to,
about.
that's going
It
to really
would-
affect the whole decompressing conversation with fire if you're going to give them 2% to begin with.
That's exactly what I was
Because that,
looking at.
again, that exacerbates the compression problem.
And so that's why I was suggesting, and at least the way I was looking at it, the minimum that anyone would get would be 2%. And what their plan was is actually 0 in some instances. So my whole thought was, if I bring it back, the minimum what anybody would get would be 2%. And we may see compression in the lower ranks or the lower paid ranks, but in the upper ones, it wouldn't affect it. That's where I was headed with that.
Yeah, well, two things. One, I think there is some urgency to it because a lot, at least the bullet points 1 and 3 are dependent upon end of the year decisions. Then I'm, now correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I kind of see that 2% in the decompression is 6 of one, half does the other. You were going to give the 2% across the board anyway. I don't,
That's not what it says.
no, it isn't what it says. And I think you guys caught that because I don't think that was the intent. The intent was to always give the 2% and then bring back the decompression package. So I don't think it's going to affect the $4 million number. Mr. Manager? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if you want to take your time and study this some more, you're welcome to do that. The only thing I would like, from a time standpoint, I need the one-time distribution because I plan to make that next week. If you would like more time, be happy to bring it back to you on December
I'd
4th.
move that.
So I would suggest, if I may, I think we should just move one, which is the one that we need to move on the quickest is the one-time distribution.
Okay.
And then give us some opportunity for until the next meeting that we could look at everything else, all the details, because we were also including, we also wanted to see, at least see what the minimum wage workers and that type of decompression would happen and how much it would cost as well. So if I may, Councilmember Scott, we should move on the one that we need to the quickest and then come back and make sure that we've studied it well and how much it's going to cost the rest of them.
I think that's a very accurate and an easy one to do. The thing is that the last time we talked about decompression and this kind of 2% raise, the police department got both. Why are we really thinking it through a second time, a third time, that the fire should be considered separate and not equal to that? And that's a little confusing to me, but I'm happy to adjust and say, let's take this one at a time. Let's do bullet 3, which is the increase one-time distribution, using the same criteria as last fiscal year.
I'll second that, the $500 Christmas turkey. I'll second that. But I don't think we're considering fire separate and unequal. What we're saying is they went back last time and tried to put together a decompression program where some people got 0 and others got whatever number it was, and they were unable to come up with internally with a solution, and so that's why they said just throw us in with a 2.5. So I don't think it's a separate and unequal. I think it's let's take our time and figure it out and bring them to the table and engage the part of the
All
conversation.
right, well,
But
let's take number 1 first, which is the motion to increase the one-time distribution. It's just that, that's
So
all.
that
that's on
is
there.
the motion and a
Motion
second.
and a second. All in favor of what is essentially bullet point 3, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Okay.
Mr.
One
Mayor.
no. Then on the 2% wage adjustment without the decompression, I just have to ask you, Mr. Manager, because of it doesn't affect just one department, it affects all the employees. Our next meeting's December 4th. I didn't get the impression from you that you were going to be ready with fire and the other minimum wage by December 4th. So how do you want to deal with that?
It'll be very difficult. Here's my suggestion, and again, this is what I was trying to do, and I apologize if I've confused you with this. It was not my intent. What I really want to do is it'll take me at least 30, maybe 45 days to fully vet the decompression plan for the fire department. I believe we can do that. We do have some proposals, but I really want to scrutinize them and make sure that we've had adequate time to go through that. The intent was always to bring that back to you, and depending on what decision you make on the 2% would affect potentially that amount. Now, I'm not saying yes or no, I'm just suggesting to you that it'll take time to do that. My nervousness is if we rush it, we can try to get it done for the 4th, but the rest of the recommendation of having this in place by the end of the calendar year or first part of next year is going to be very difficult for us.
But why wouldn't we go ahead, if your intent was to increase every employee 2%, if they've been here 2 years by December 23rd, why wouldn't we go ahead and pass that?
That's what I basically was suggesting. That was my
And
recommendation.
then we'll deal with the decompression.
I will bring that back to you within 45 days, both the fire plan as well as the $30,000 employee minimum wage.
But I guess the question to you is, I think what Steve and Paul might be asking is that if you do that, is that going to change the numbers? It's not going to change the numbers. You've got a number.
It's going to change the numbers. The numbers are, we've already run the numbers for the 2%, so we know what that will cost. What I think Councilor Romero had asked was, what do I have put aside for fire? And I said somewhere between $2 and $2.5 million. That's my target. That's where I'm headed. So once I
Is
get
that
that,
$2.5 million for decompression or $2.5
correct.
million including the 2%?
no, that's $2.5 million for
So
decompression.
you're going to do the 1.4 for fire today, and then we're going to for their 2%, and then do another $2 million for decompression. If that's what we're doing, I'm good with that.
I don't know the number. I can't tell
I
you.
think we need to make sure that we bring those numbers and that we're clear on the numbers before we vote on anything. I think it's important that we know exactly we're giving our employees, each and every one of them, anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 of one-time distribution.
That's
That
done.
we all know, that's done. We know the numbers for sure. We feel comfortable with them. Everything else, I think we need to make sure that we have clear numbers in front of us. If that includes the decompression plus the 2% for fire, and then we also need to look at the numbers for the possibility of also including those minimum wage workers. And we need to have a full deck of cards in front of us so that we know exactly what our hand is.
Council, if I might, just so that you're aware of this, we can bring that back to you, and we'll do that in December. We will have to make it effective, though, probably later, like February. It won't happen in January then.
So I'll try one more time. Had we not had the typo up there that said, and who are not part of the decompression plan,
I have to say the wording was my fault.
Well,
My intent was they got the 2%, but those employees are not part of the decompression. The decompression was the firefighters. So that wording was my error.
well, it doesn't matter. All right.
So my understanding is that the cost of decompressing fire is 2% plus 2.5 million. But that 2%, that everybody might not necessarily get 2.5%, 2%.
Correct.
Because that money might be distributed differently
Right.
under the fire decompression plan. So I don't believe that was a mistake, because on the assumption that the fire decompression is going to cost 2% plus 2.5 million
I just don't want.
for those affected people.
That's actually good.
And that gives maximum freedom to tailor the decompression for maximum decompression.
I agree with everything that you just said. Originally, when fire looked at it, they said some people are going to get 0, and some people are going to get 4 or whatever, to truly decompress their wage situation. Giving 2% right off the top crunches them back together again. That's not decompression.
So I would like to see us approve 1 and 3 with the gloss I just explained.
And just
That would mean that the package, the package, that would mean that the package for fire would be around a total of $4 million.
let's.
Mr. Ortega, I mean, so the other, I mean,
Mr.
I bet Fire's sitting back there. I don't want to call on them, but I bet if you said to them right now, we'll take our 2% and worry about it, they would. I don't want to delay other employees' raises because of this decompression issue.
Mr. Mayor.
Here's the deal. This is what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to say we give everybody but fire the 2% December 23rd. Fire may get it a few weeks later, but it'll roll into their compression. We'll roll it into the decompression plan as best we can, such as long as we're spending 2% plus $2.5 million. I'm good with that. I'm totally good with that.
I'm saying take our time.
I didn't expect this to be as, but it's a good problem to have, and I'm appreciative of the thoughts. So when we first looked at this, one of the pieces that I saw when I heard or understood what Fire was proposing was to go to 0 to some pretty big numbers, up to over 20%. So my thought was the minimum in Fire would be 2%. That was just simplistically, I was thinking that. Yes, you're right, it doesn't help on that lower wage earner in that department with decompression, but it addresses, a need that we've got. That was the thought. It's simple. It's not about putting a pot of this and a pot. It was really more about, let's see what the plan needs to be to decompress that area, and then put dollars so that the minimum for those that are tenured, that are here longer than 2 years, would be 2%. That's the thought. It wasn't any more complex than that. So, Mr. Mayor, I would echo and suggest that if the council would give me direction to do 2% for employees today, I'd appreciate that, because that will give me opportunity to do that in the January, I think it's the January timeframe, for their adjustments. Otherwise, we're going to delay it. I understand. I will bring you back. We'll make every effort to bring it back to you on the 4th with the complete plan as best we can. It's a deadline, so that's good. I'd be happy to do that. So that would be my recommendation to the council, is that you consider giving me the direction for 2% across the board based on the criteria that we've provided. And then I'll come back to you December 4th, and we'll deal with the decompression issues.
So could the motion be the 2% plus the one-time distribution?
Yeah,
we already voted on
We've done the one
one-time.
time.
Okay.
So now it would be, the motion would be 2% across.
I would
the
make
board.
that motion.
All right, do we have a second for the motion?
So that's
Well, hold on.
across the board, including fire.
But it also has the caveat that, wait, is it 2% for every employee in fire? Or is it 2% to fire to be used in decompression later?
Mr. Mayor, it's 2% for all city employees that have been here longer than 2 years, based on the
Period.
criteria I've outlined, period.
Period.
And so then, again, it affects the decompression, which I'm expecting, and then we just work through that. I mean, the number for decompression won't change. How we approach it might change, but it doesn't change it. I mean, I'm just trying to, get us past that. I think that we can bring back a plan that you can get your arms around, and it'll be fine.
All right, we've got a motion. Do we have a second? If we don't have a second,
I can't believe you don't want to give our hardworking city employees a 2% raise.
Nobody's saying that.
That's what it's
Nobody's
coming
saying
down
that.
to, sir.
No, it isn't. What it's saying is, let's take our time, do the analysis, and if it delays it a month or whatever, that's fine. It can maybe even be made retroactively, but let's do the analysis.
I just wonder, can it be done retroactively if, is that harder?
It would be very difficult for the payroll people, because it's a lot of different calculations.
Let 'em figure it out
Particularly
then.
when you're looking at fire suppression pay. It is a lot of calculations and human error.
You know what?
Can you
Right.
tell me
If it-
what 2%, if I may, Mr. Mayor? Can you tell me what 2% across the board? What is the attached number that we would be saying yes to right now?
It's a $6 million annual cost. General fund. Is that general fund?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's general fund, yeah. It's 6 million, it's 3 million. We had budgeted and expected about 3 million from January through June. And so it's a 6 million annual cost. That's what we're anticipating for the 20-year.
For all employees?
Within the criteria, that's correct. And that's permanent employees within the criteria.
So, Mr. Ortega, you don't particularly need the freedom to take that 2% and make it part of the fire decompression plan. You're willing to increase across the board 2%.
That was the original.
And deal with the compression later as part of the fire decompression plan.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Durham, that's correct.
Okay. I'll second the motion.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this matter? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone no?
Nope.
Okay. All right, then, we're not quite done, because you have all the other bullet points, and really what you're just looking for there is that not any kind of motion today, but just sort of the sense of the council that you're headed in the right direction there. Is that correct?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just quickly as you go through these, the 2 million, as Councilman Kozacek mentioned, the sales tax the development agreements, that's a requirement. It really, I probably shouldn't even be here. I mean, it's just it's something we've got to do. The self-insurance, again, gives you flexibility. I'm just suggesting we'll bring that back to you in a separate conversation about self-insurance. We're expecting that to be 5 million by the end of the year. We'll definitely give you flexibility to do that. The Parks and Recreation, 1.5 million. Again, that'll help us with some of our M&O. And then the 2 million for the EPC financing.
Okay.
Mr. Ortega, if I might say, just with the energy performance projects, those are going on now. So if I need to finance it, I would prefer not doing that because it does cost us an interest. So I would prefer paying cash for it, but if mayor and council would like me to finance it, then I need to go through the financing process.
What is the financing cost?
It would be interest of about $200,000 over the term.
I think any financing cost when we have an alternative is to be avoided.
Sure. Yeah. If you got the money, pay for it. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, basically that's it. I think gives us opportunity to move on some of these things. I can bring back whatever in more detail. You'll definitely be having a conversation about self-insurance down the road. And so you'll have, that really isn't, that's just a decision to set it aside, not to do it, and that'll come back to you in the future.
Okay, let's move. Anything else on the budget for now?
Was that a request for approval of the $2 million for the energy performance? I would like to make that motion. I do now.
What's the conversation?
I would like to move that we approve the assignment of $2 million for the energy performance
A second.
project in lieu of financing.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second on that matter. Any other conversation there? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right. It looks like the other numbers might be need a little more study.
So the rest of them are where exactly, Mr. Mayor?
Okay.
Do you want me to bring them back, or, I mean, what's... Oh, okay, so you'd like me to bring all those back to you? Or you want to do it now? I'm sorry, I'm not following you, I apologize.
Yeah, I think you'd indicated that the 4.6 might move to 5. The 1.5 I think is pretty solid, but I think we might want some more conversation there when the park ranger conversation comes back. The maintenance fund are probably good numbers, but there's not any urgency on those, are there?
No,
Okay.
no. I think-
All right. All right.
May I assume that the ongoing conversation with fire about their decompression issue doesn't need a vote at this table? It's just ongoing. Good. Thank you.
Now, are you intending to come back on any budget matter on December 4th or December 18th or January something?
So, Mr. Mayor, we'll be back as quickly as we can. We'll try to make it for the 4th. If not, it'll be on the 18th.
Okay.
But
Well, and
do
it, and it would be nice if you do come back, that we see some numbers for the decompression, more solid numbers.
you'll have
We
all
see
that
some
detail.
numbers for the minimum wage workers.
So right, we have a Thanksgiving holiday, so if you're looking for the materials ahead of time, we're not going to get them to you in Sire on time.
Well, at least we'll have some numbers that are much more solid than what we have now.
But our next meeting's not till December 4th. Thanksgiving.
This is a lot of math, a lot of looking. We do need to speak with the fire department, so it is going to take us some time to get the materials
Okay,
ready.
I mean, all right. I think we're, to tell you the truth, I think we're way ahead of cycle right now. I mean, if this is what our conversation is going to be on budget this year, that's even better news than being $29 million in the
Mr. Mayor,
plan.
you have a $1.5 billion budget. We went over 29 million, so it might take a while.
You have more? All right, let's move on to item 4, state and national legislation scheduled. for
Great job.
10
Thank you
minutes.
so much, Joyce and Mr. Manager.
So,
Mr.
Honorable Mayor,
Green.
members of the council, I distributed answers to questions from the Vice Mayor earlier today. I know he's not here. Happy to answer any questions about state or federal issues.
Did anybody have anything for Mr. Greenhill at this time?
Yeah, I had a question.
Sure.
How does our story in terms of the city of Tucson change now with the new majority on the House side? I have heard that that there is a movement in terms of infrastructure, that there could be bipartisan work on. So how is the city of Tucson ready or getting ourselves ready for an infrastructure conversation? In terms of the city of Tucson, both our interstates and our in the urban core, or in the city of Tucson proper, in terms of infrastructure.
Sure.
And then anything else that you might want to add with with the new Congress.
Sure. Honorable Mayor, members of the council, yes, as you know, last week, one of the results of the federal elections is that there will be a change of power in the House of Representatives. As we speak today, it looks like the Democrats gained about 35 seats. That may even inch up more, but once all the counting is done. I was appreciative to have our federal lobbyists come to town last week, and we were lucky enough to meet with many of your offices as well as city staff to talk about some of the opportunities that we believe we may have with the change of power in the House. One of the areas that we are especially focused on, as Councilmember Romero mentioned, is transportation. What we've heard so far is that Peter DeFazio, who is the congressperson from Oregon, who's likely to be the chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, has been talking about putting together a bill in the House that may be upwards of $800 billion to $1 trillion in a federal infrastructure plan. Now, this is an amount that sounds like a lot, and it is, of course. It is something that the Republicans have talked about, including President Trump, and have not moved forward on. So if indeed that happens, we'll probably know in January. If we see it coming, we will be talking with city staff about, okay, if there is going to be that kind of bill, and depending on how it's put together, is it grants, is it earmarks, how will it work? That will determine for us what kind of recommendations we can make to city staff about what types of projects or what types of transportation funding we may want to go for. We'll know more about that in January, like I said. In other areas, I'd say, with housing, with other formula-type fundings that we get, we're very hopeful that at the very least we won't see any reductions in that funding. We do expect that once the changeover happens, we may see, as we saw at the beginning of the Trump administration, their proposed budget will have lots of cuts in it. But we do not expect that to see the light of day in the House, to put it mildly. We're very hopeful that funding for things like CDBG and home and other federal programs that we depend upon, transit, that they will be at the very least level funding, if not even see some increases over the next couple of years.
And of course, we have a new senator-elect, Kirsten Sinema.
We do.
I think that it's really important that the city of Tucson lobbyists and the mayor and council continue developing the relationship with our new senator and make sure that we're working and that we're ready with infrastructure projects, if that is where, there will be bipartisanship and something moving forward. But I just wanted to make sure that we talked about that a bit, because it's going to be important to be able to build that relationship with the new senator and then put the city of Tucson. We have to have like a to-do list ready to go. And this is for our city manager, especially also as well TDOT and other departments, that we're ready to go with our needs if in fact there is some movement on infrastructure funding.
Sure. And Honorable Mayor, members of the council, Councilman Romero, as a congresswoman, Congresswoman Sinema has been very helpful to the state as well as to the cities of the state, and including Tucson. And we have included her in the past in meetings on city issues, and we've stood shoulder to shoulder, certainly with Phoenix and other cities, when we've approached her in the past on important issues to the state. So we'll continue those relationships and those meetings, of course, as she takes the office of senator. And we're looking forward very much to working with her as well as to others who have now been elected to Congress, including former Mayor and now Congressman Greg Stanton of Phoenix.
And Congresswoman Kirkpatrick was a ranking member of the Transportation Department in the House before, and I would assume that she will go back to that seat where she was probably more knowledgeable than any other Arizona congressperson. Our relationships with our federal officials are probably stronger now than they've been since I've been here as a result of this election. So
Right,
hopefully good
then
things.
we should also celebrate that Congressman Grijalva is now the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, which is really important when it comes to public lands, possible water conversations within the state of Arizona. So we have to make sure that we're also keep an eye on the issues that are coming out of the Natural Resources Committee and how it affects Arizona and how it affects Tucson.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Anything else for Andrew? If not, we'll move on to item 5, which is the regular agenda. Does anyone have any items to remove from the consent agenda? If not, we will go to item 6, future agendas. Anybody have anything today for future agendas? If not, we will move directly into we will adjourn study session, and we will move directly into the Public Housing Authority meeting and immediately follow that with the regular meeting. Why don't we take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and go to PHA. Tucson Public Housing Authority will stand in session. Let's go to roll call.
Ms. Romero? Here. Mr. Cunningham? Here. Mr. Durham?
Here.
Mrs. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Mohammed? Here. Mr. Kozaczek? Vice Mayor Fimbres?
He's absent.
Mayor Rothschild.
Here. Item 2.
Public Housing Authority approval of the Public Housing Authority programs, payments, standards, utility allowances, flat rent, and max rent schedules. Report from City Manager, Resolution Number PHA 2018-005.
City Manager's communication number 366, dated November 14, is received into and made part of the record. Mr. Clerk, you're requested to read Resolution PHA 2018-005 by number and title only.
Resolution Number PHA 2018-005 relating to housing and community development, approving the adoption of schedules for the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher and public housing programs as required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, payment standards, utility allowances, flat rents, and max rents, and setting an effective date.
What's the board's pleasure?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we pass and adopt Resolution PHA 2018-005.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on this matter? Hearing none, let's go to roll call.
Ms. Romero? Aye. Mr. Cunningham? Aye. Mr. Durham?
Aye.
Mrs. Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Mohammed?
Aye.
Mr. Kozaczek?
Aye.
Mayor Rothschild.
Aye. Resolution PHA 2018-05 passes by a vote of 7-0. Item 3.
Approval of Public Housing Authority minutes.
City Manager's communication number 367, dated November 14, is received into and made part of the record. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the June 5, 2018 meeting?
So moved.
Get a second? We got a motion and a second. Any discussion on that matter? Hearing none, let's go to roll call.
Ms. Romero? Aye. Mr. Cunningham? Mr. Durham?
Aye.
Mrs. Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Mohammed?
Aye.
Mr. Kozaczek?
Aye.
Mayor Rothschild.
Aye. The motion to approve the minutes of June 5, 2018 passed by a vote of 7-0. Item 4.
Adjournment.
Meeting of the Board of Commissioners is adjourned. The mayor and council will now convene our regular meeting.
Thank you for coming down.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. It's my pleasure always. Thank you.
We'll stand in session. Let's go to roll call.
Ms. Romero?
Down there, she's there.
Mr. Cunningham?
He's there too.
Mr. Durham?
He's there too.
They're all,
Mrs. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Fimbres?
He's not here.
Mr. Kozaczek?
yep.
Mayor Rothschild.
Here. Item 2.
Invocation and Pledge of Allegiance.
The invocation will be given by Anna Marufo from the City Clerk's Office. After the invocation, I ask that you remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing us to this meeting today, healthy and open-minded. We ask for guidance for the mayor and council as they make decisions that will affect the lives of all Tucsonans. Help to make these decisions without bias or prejudice. It is important to remember to do what is best for the entire community. We know this is not an easy task, but we ask for guidance in that which will benefit most people. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 2C.
Appointments to boards, committees, and commissions.
City Manager's communication number 364, dated November 14, is received into and made part of the record. Are there any personal appointments to be made at this time? If not, we will move on to item 3.
Mayor and council and city managers' reports, summary of current events.
City Manager's communication number 361, dated November 14, is received into and made part of the record. This time has been scheduled to allow members of the mayor and council and the city manager to report on current events. Does any council member have anything to report at this time? If not, Councilmember Durham.
Jane Hill, a founding volunteer at Lend a Hand when it began in 2006, passed away on November 2nd. Dr. Hill, as most people knew her, was a renowned anthropologist and professor emerita at the University of Arizona, who volunteered to assist seniors in Ward 3 with Lend a Hand through the last years of her career and beyond. Her fellow volunteers knew Jane as a great people person who made friends with senior neighbors who were lonely and needed the assurance and strength of others to keep getting up in the morning to enjoy life. She left us with a strong example of lend-a-hand volunteerism. Ward 3 and Lend-a-Hand will miss her spirit.
Okay, thank you. Any other council member have anything to report? If not, city manager? Okay, let's move on to item 4.
Boards, committees, and commissions, reports to mayor and council. Your Honor, there are no reports for this meeting.
All right, let's move on to item 5.
Liquor license applications, report from city manager.
City manager's communication number 363, dated November 14, is received and made part of the record. Mr. Clerk, please read the liquor license agenda.
Your Honor, on this evening's liquor license agenda, under item 5B, we have 5 requests for new license, 1 request for person transfer. Under item 5C, we have 4 requests for special events. Under item 5D, we have 2 requests for agent change, acquisition of control. Staff has indicated that all the applicants are in compliance with city requirements. An appropriate motion would be to forward items 5B 1 through 6, C 1 through 4, and D 1 and 2 to the State Liquor Board with a recommendation of approval.
So moved.
We got a motion and a second. Any discussion on this matter? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion carries. Let's go to item 6.
Call to the audience.
At this time, any member of the public is allowed to address the mayor and council on any issue. Please make sure you've read the information on the back of the speaker's card before making your presentation. Speakers are limited to 3-minute presentations. Call to the audience is scheduled to last for 30 minutes. Pursuant to the Arizona Open Meeting Law, individual council members may ask the city manager to review the matter, ask the matter to be placed on a future agenda, or respond to criticism made by speakers. However, the mayor and council may not discuss or take legal action or matters raised during call to the audience. Mr. Clerk, have we had anybody who wishes to speak today at call to the audience?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, let's move on to item 7.
Consent agenda items A through E.
Reports from the city manager on the consent agenda are received and made part of the record. Mr. Clerk, you are requested to read the consent agenda.
Your Honor, on this evening's consent agenda, item A is approval of minutes. Item B is an intergovernmental agreement with the Tucson Unified School District for school resource officers. Item C is an intergovernmental agreement with Pima Community College for the Oracle Corridor Community Outreach Liaison. Item D is a resolution recognizing the importance of the 2020 census. Item E is Tucson Code amending Chapter 2 related to city office hours.
May I have a motion, please?
Your Honor, I'd like to move all the items on the consent agenda.
Got a motion, we got a second. Any other discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, let's go to roll call.
Mr. Cunningham?
Aye.
Mrs. Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Kozaczek? Ms. Romero? Aye. Mayor Rothschild?
Aye.
Mr. Durham?
Aye.
Items on the consent agenda are approved by a vote of 6-0. Item 8.
Transportation, approving the appointment of Diana ALLOWANCES as the Director of the Department of Transportation. Report from City Manager, ordinance number 11597.
City manager's communication number 369, dated November 14, is received into and made part of the record. Mr. Clerk, you're requested to read ordinance 11597 by number and title only.
Ordinance number 11597 relating to the Department of Transportation, approving the appointment of Diana ALLOWANCES as the Director of Department of Transportation and fixing compensation, setting an effective date, and declaring an emergency.
What is the council's pleasure?
Your Honor, it gives me great pleasure to move that we pass and adopt ordinance 11597.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on this matter? Councilmember Romero.
I'd like to personally welcome Ms. ALARCON to the city of Tucson. I had the pleasure of actually taking her out to a Ward 1 tour. Yesterday, she brought a wealth of information and is a really solutions-focused individual. I'm really happy that the city of Tucson, the city manager, and the rest of us are welcoming her to the city of Tucson. And as a bonus, she absolutely loved BK's on 12th, and we walked over to La Estrella Bakery. And it's just wonderful to have her. So I just wanted to welcome her and say how lucky we are to have her.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, just FYI, Diana's not here. She's actually at new employer orientation. So depending on your vote, I'll call her and let her know to continue or not. But she's at new employer orientation today.
Okay. Anything else on this matter? If not, let's go to roll call.
Mr. Durham?
Aye.
Mayor Rothschild.
Aye.
Mr. Cunningham. Ms. Romero.
Aye.
Mr. Kozaczek. Mrs. Scott.
Aye.
Ordinance 11597 passes by a vote of 6-0. Item 9,
Adjournment.
council will stand adjourned. Next regularly scheduled meeting will be on Tuesday, December 4th at 5:30 PM in the Mayor and Council Chambers, 255 West Alameda. Thank you.